what I heard all growing up was big voices are impressive. And it was all about the bigger, the better in the Met auditions. And so I was always a little bit obsessed with pushing my voice to make it big, right? Instead of understanding how acoustics work. And there was a part of me that wanted to impress people and that wanted to be admired and wanted to receive that validation, kind of became my why. But that led to vocal production that then was over trying and over singing to impress rather than express.
I was studying with a very, very good teacher that taught me very, very good technique. And we never got through an entire aria, ever. So that was my mindset. I'm not good enough to do a whole song. So that's bad.
Welcome to the SingWell Karaoke Show. I'm Linor at your service. Today's topic is healthy why, healthy vocals. I have the great honor of speaking to a fellow teacher, Alisa, who has a very crucial insight about why we're doing this in the first place. Why are we singing and how that affects our actual vocal mechanism. We never think about that, but today we're going to break it down for you. We have the letter of the day, and of course we have some singing because this is a singing show. Let's do this. Hi, I'm Linor. I'm a singer and a voice teacher. You know, there is a phrase in the Bible that says something like, I don't know the English version, I know the Hebrew version, but it says something like, of all my teachers / educators, I am the smarter. Many people think that it means that whoever said that phrase thinks that they're smarter than everyone else, than everyone who tried to teach them. I think it means that you learn something and become smarter from this interaction with all of your educators. And even further, everyone you meet is your educator. And I believe this version of the phrase more than ever since talking to my fellow teacher, Alisa. And she raised a question that she ended up answering, and I stumbled answering. And it's a very philosophical question about the reason we're singing and how we end up sounding. And it is very deep and abstract question, but the answer turned out to be very practical and pragmatic, so I'm sure you'll find that useful. So I became smarter after talking to her today, so without further ado, let's go to my call with Alisa.
Hi, I have Alisa here from Utah, all the way from the US. Hi.
Hello.
You're my first video caller, so that's fun.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Doing great. It's morning here.
So hopefully I'll get you all pumped up and energized. So yeah, you're a voice teacher, right? And a singer like me. And so what's going on in your singing world? What would you like to ask today?
So first of all, I just want to say that I think you're awesome. And I love your honesty. I love your emails that you send out and like all the little random funny things that you say. I just
Thank you.
Be so authentically you. And I think that that's a wonderful, admirable thing, that you can be so authentic. And I want to talk today about a singer's why. So basically like, why do you want to sing? So my question for you is, what role does the why play in a singer's motivation to practice, to perform, to pursue opportunities? And how important is a healthy why to healthy vocal production?
Ooh. So I never thought of the second part of the question. I'm going to think, while I answer the first part, I'm going to think about the second part. But that's a fascinating question. So is the question what the role the why plays, or is it what role it should play? Because if you're asking basically what does the why do, like what role does it play in the motivation? In real life, the answer is a bit unfortunate. It doesn't do much once the student gets into a certain part of their process. Most of the time, we lose that why. Yeah. So especially if you're a perfectionist, especially if you have a big dream of becoming a very successful singer, you very easily get into a loop of just getting better and better and better, and you forget why you did it. And mostly when someone gets into, I don't know what your experience is, but for me and for my students, the why is usually, I want to have the joy of singing. Yeah. Or I want to express myself with music. I want to create a connection through music, through singing. So that, if that's your why, the way it can and should play a role in your motivation to practice is actually something that I use with my students. And that's the fourth part of every practice that I recommend. And that should be the sing through session. So you have your chance to work on the technique. That's all great. And then you have to have a few minutes of singing through the piece. And when you sing through the piece, you are not allowed to work on the technique anymore. So you're allowed to find that joy again, right? So you think about the music, the lyrics, you do a few performance exercises on it, and thereby you can also improve the actual song and improve the actual technique, but you're not fixating on the technique. At this point, you're thinking about the song as a whole, and that is your connection to why I'm doing this, what this means to me, what does this song mean to me, and so on. Does that answer your question so far?
Yes. And I think that's a really healthy why, the one that you mentioned about for the joy of singing and to express yourself and find a connection with your audience. I love those things. And I think that it is easy to lose them, as you also mentioned. So my next question, my follow-up question just explained is easier said than done to let technique go, right? Our brain can only think of so much at once. And I love this idea of the sing through session and letting go of thinking about technique, consciously thinking about technical aspects of the song and just being expressive, the joy to come out. But how do you actually do that?
That's the $1 million question. Yeah, you're very right. It's very difficult to do, which is why you have to practice this. So the thing is, if you don't, let's go from the flip side. If you don't practice singing through, you will always be stuck at the technique session, like the technique part of the practice. So you will always be thinking like, well, I'm not good enough where I am. If you ever want to be prepared for performing or just maintaining the joy, I'm getting excited by the topic, so I'm stuttering. But if you ever want to keep the joy of singing and not lose it, you have to be able to do this. So it could be a little bit fake in the beginning, like, okay, I'm deciding to not stop until I'm done, right? If it's super, super hard, then start with a verse and a chorus. Just do half the song. But eventually you have to be able to go through the song and not fixate on the technique. Because otherwise there will be no transfer from the technique part to the singing through part. And I did that for a few years. I was studying with a very, very good teacher that taught me very, very good technique. And we never got through an entire aria, ever. So that was my mindset. I'm not good enough to do a whole song. So that's bad. Because I actually went to a lesson with someone else, and he said, okay, let's start singing. And halfway through the verse, I was like, are you going to stop me? Please stop me. I cannot sustain this anymore. Like that was what's going in my head. So that's not a way to go. So if you have to force yourself to sing through at first, do it. And just I call it the non-stop principle. You have to go through the thing And then later you can think about what you can do to improve it as a whole. And that usually goes through the musical meaning, the phrasing, meaning of the text, stuff like that. Yeah. And you're not expecting, like the 100% of your abilities at that moment to reflect in the sing through session. In advance, you expect that it's going to be less good, quote unquote, but it's also going to be better in other aspects. And you should do the performance exercises that I have on YouTube.
Yeah, as you were talking, I remembered the performance exercises because that's also something that I found very brilliant, that distracts the mind from fixating on the technique, right?
Yes.
Because you're giving your mind something else to do, which is pretend you're underwater, or I'm trying to remember the ones that I saw that you did. Wasn't that one?
Yeah, well, underwater while you have an audience, and as you sing, you're like an inflatable fish. You just, get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's a good example for a performance exercise that will just put you in a scenario, and that scenario will improve your technique as well. But that's like a side bonus. It's not the goal. The goal is to be in the scenario and like have something in mind that will get you to keep going.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Eventually, hopefully it will be the communication, the meaning behind the song, the joy of singing.
Yes.
And not some distraction that will but I guess there are steps, right, to take you away from fixating on technique.
Yeah. Well, that's a step, in my opinion. So you have an element of technique, but that's not your main concern.
Right.
And then they're basically performance exercises as there are ideas. You can make it up. Anyone can make up something that will put them in a position of empowerment, capability, mentally, right?
Yeah.
A play, and fun. And that will get you basically from the beginning to the end with some kind of narrative in between. Yeah. And that's a performance.
Yeah. And that is, I think you're right, a very good stepping stone to get from fixation on technique, not making it through a song. I'm so sorry. That is, I have had that experience too in voice lessons where it was like such a fixation on each individual pitch and how it was produced. And it was like even singing a whole phrase was in full order, let alone an entire aria. So then that's kind of a micro level, right?
Yes, I wasn't even sure what aria I could sing, that I could just sing. You know how they say when you go to an audition, just pick that aria that is just there. I didn't have anything like that because I was always at the level of one phrase at a time and technique and improving the technique and improving the voice and just the raw material of the voice. And that's very important. You have to do that if you want to get better, but you cannot stay there. You have to make the transfer. Yes. And that's how you make the transfer.
Yeah, and if you're auditioning, then you've got to be ready to sing the whole aria all the way through. If you're not auditioning yet, then fine, stay in student mode. But at some point, you have to transfer over, right? You can't go to an audition and say, well, I'm a student, so I hope you like what I'm doing and you approve of me, right? You have to go in and say,
exactly,
I'm a master, at least of this, at least of this aria, I'm a master.
I'm a complete product.
Yeah.
I'm ready, take me. Yeah, but that's the thing. I recommend this sing through session for beginners as well, because as we both know, it's very easy to get in a loop of the technique and improving the technique. So right off the bat, you should be able to make that transfer. And the transfer is a process.
Yeah.
So how does a healthy why, like, doing it for the joy of music or doing it for the human connection, what was that part of the question?
Hi, let's take a little break from the call. I have something important to say. Did you know that you can also call the show and talk to me? I would love to hear from you if you are struggling with anything that has to do with singing. Or if you went through some difficulties and came out the other end. I would love to have you on the show. All you have to do is go on my blog, SingWell.eu, and contact me through there. Keep in touch. Now let's get back to the show.
Like how can a healthy why inform the actual vocal mechanism? I mean, this is just
Yes.
very much the psychology of singing. I
Yes.
feel like it plays in so much.
I would be interested to know what you think about it. My instinct would say that it has everything to do with that nonstop principle and the sing through session. And you having the fluency, right, of the singing, which by the way means you have actual airflow. Okay, here's another thing. If you're feeling the voice and you're feeling the song very genuinely, you feel them on the inside of your body. Well, that's healthy singing, isn't it? So you're using your actual vocal instrument for the singing, and you're not thinking necessarily about like I have to deliver it to the last row of the opera house. This is just I'm feeling this.
Yeah, you're an integrated whole. What I'm hearing you say is when you do the sing through and when you sort of give yourself permission to do the whole thing and not to pick it apart, you become this integrated whole. You are the whole package.
Yes.
But there is this tendency, I think, to become fragmented in our singing and to pick ourselves apart, which is the opposite of the integrated whole, right? And that's where I think that some of those underlying whys that may come from childhood wounding and things like that can come out, like, I want to be enough. I want to be good enough. I don't believe I am good enough. I need you to tell me I'm good enough, kind of a thing. And I feel like what I heard all growing up was big voices are impressive. And it was all about the bigger, the better, and the med auditions. And it was, if you show up with a big voice, that's the one that they're going to advance to the next round and whatever. And so I was always a little bit obsessed with pushing my voice to make it big, right? Instead of understanding how acoustics work, which I do now, thank heavens, but this was decades ago when I was young. And there was a part of me that wanted to impress people and that wanted to be admired and wanted to receive that validation. And that kind of became my why. But then that led to, this is kind of, maybe it's a leading question, but that led to vocal production that then was over trying and over singing and for that to impress rather than express.
So you basically answered it very thoroughly. So like we can make the connection between a healthy why and a healthy production and a non-healthy why to a non-healthy production of the actual voice. I never thought about that, but that actually the reason why you're doing this can influence your actual vocal technique. That's amazing. But it makes a lot of sense because it's very much a mental game.
Right. What I think about actually, because having grown up a classical singer, there's a certain way of approaching that music, and there's a certain culture surrounding that type of singing. And like I said, the med auditions, such as like, I'm 20 years old, but I want to be an opera singer on the Met stage someday.
Mm-hmm.
So impress these judges with my amazing singing. But I think also about a lot of my young students who are wanting to sing pop music. And it's like, they just want to push the voice. They just want to push it from the bottom up as high as they can. And it gets all strained. And it's not about expression anymore, but it's like, well, but I hear what Adele sounds like. And I hear what these pop singers who are on the radio sound like, and they sound so powerful. And I'm trying to explain that power is not from muscular strain. That power, because that works against the acoustic, right? That power is actually from understanding. Now I can't remember what you call it. Everyone has a different word for it, but it's the squeaky voice. And it comes from obviously support in the diaphragm and not in the throat. See a parallel, even, myself having the classical background. I also sing pop music sometimes and teach it. And I do see that sort of, maybe it's happening one passaggio earlier for them than it did for me as a classical singer. But I definitely see that tendency, not just in myself, but in my students.
Yes. And I see that too. I completely see what you're saying. Wow. Really good question. Thank you.
Like bringing the joy back into this not being enough, because joy is the integrated whole. Right?
Yes.
Not being enough is the fragmented sort of picking yourself apart. I'm not adequate in this way.
Yeah. And you really can see it that way. Like the joy of the singing is the enabler of your voice. And that pressure and the so-called ambition, but that drive to impress and do it, for the ego, for other people, that pressure is a physical pressure, and that is actually standing in your way. Also, the mental pressure, by the way, will prevent you from actually doing the technique that you want. Because instead of doing the technique, you'll be thinking, was that good enough? Was that good enough? Was this not good enough? Was this not? And then you won't be doing it. So mental pressure is physical pressure. Thank you so much for that. That was a really nice lesson for everybody.
Oh, these are things I think about.
Yeah. You care enough to think about those things. You don't just get your paycheck, I can tell.
It's my whole life.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for now. Yeah, keep in touch if you have more ideas.
Oh, I'm sure I will. Happy to.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Alisa and I really think almost all the time about the experiences of our students and how we can help them get the best learning experience and really avoid the mistakes and the bad experience that we had, or the bad experiences and incidents and bad choices that we made. Alisa tried to push her voice because she thought her why at a certain point became, I need to be impressive, I need my voice to be big, and the way I do that is by creating it, pushing it, adding effort to it. My why became at a certain point from that priceless connection with the audience that I felt as an audience member by an opera singer, which led me to want to be an opera singer, because I was just there feeling like there is nothing better than this. I wanted to create that for someone else. That why has become, I need to be the very best of the best, otherwise it's not worth a thing. And I'll tell you a story that where I started feeling that this was becoming my why. I was watching, it was Popea. It's an opera, it's a Baroque opera with the stellar Maria Ewing, and she is an opera singer. She's a mezzo-soprano, top notch, and definitely one of my favorites. And in that production of Popea, starred by Maria Ewing, I was thinking, all the other singers are very good, but I don't care about them. I care about her. She is the reason I'm watching this. And that made me think, well, I have to be that then. Otherwise, I don't care. And like years later, I realized that might have been partially true, that she was the one shining the brightest, but the other ones made the whole experience what it was. And Maria would not have been able to shine above anyone if there was not anyone there. And for someone, somewhere, another one in that production, another singer, would have made the difference, would be more relatable. So the fact that I happen to like her doesn't mean that you always have to be the top star. So I know that now, but for a very long time I had that mentality, and that led me in the loop of having to be the best. And I stopped performing and auditioning for a total of 2 years. I cannot tell you how devastating that was for my career. It was excruciatingly difficult to go back and audition after not singing a whole song from start to finish for 2 years and not have been on stage for 2 years. And I'm sure I'm going to talk about that a lot more in another episode, where we're going to talk about performance a little bit more and about the stage and stage fright, this topic is definitely coming up because I had a big story with stage fright that I had to overcome. But long story short, don't do that to yourself. Do not do that. Always go through the singing through. Always sing a song from start to finish, or as I said before, at least half the song. Have some sense of flow. Have some sense of the whole product. If you lose that, you won't only lose your why, you will lose the ability to actually deliver that product. And it will take a very long time to get that back. So that's all I have to say about that for today. And now on that note, let's go to the letter of the day. So today at the letter of the day corner, we have someone who we will call Adriana. And she writes, "Hi there, Linor. I'm extremely excited and very nervous about trying singing lessons. I've only ever sung for fun, really mainly in the shower, but I have never actually considered singing as a hobby." Maybe she means as a profession. That's what it sounds like to me. Because I never felt my voice was good enough. I don't believe I can really sing at all, but I do enjoy it. I'm not sure where to begin, but I want to see how much I can push myself to grow. So I like that. I like that vibe a lot, Adriana, because that reminds me of that spark that I had in the beginning. Yeah, and then I still have that sometimes today, but there's nothing like that innocence, enthusiasm of when you just discover that you want to do this. Whether it's for a hobby or for a profession, you know you want to sing, you have a passion for it, you feel the fire. I love that. And I just want to beg you, Adriana, first of all, never lose that. Never lose this hobby. Never lose this fun. Never lose this singing in the shower. Just because you are now starting to explore what you can actually do. Now, I don't know if it's true that you don't sing well or you don't have a good voice. I talked about that last episode. I'm usually skeptical when someone says that about themselves. But even if it were true, even if you were very bad, even if your voice was very, very not good at all, I would still go ahead and start learning how to sing. Because when you start learning about the vocal function and start exploring what your voice can do, you realize it actually can do some stuff. And when you learn how to do a bunch of stuff, you start getting a feeling of control. But before you get that feeling of control, that's very important. You have to understand there is this period of frustration, and that happens to almost everybody. When you realize the gap between what you can do, hypothetically, or what you could do in the lesson to where you are right now. Because say you went to a lesson or even a YouTube tutorial and they gave you something to do and you did it and it worked. That does not mean that now it's in your system and you can just do it whenever you want. And I talked about that in the first episode, actually. There is a process of muscle memory, a vocal process that you have to go through, which is called practice. And you have to be in that place where you are not yet able to do what you know you're able to do all the time. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. Maybe you did it once and then you lost it and you have to get it back. It's muscle memory, so you have to understand that, and you have to accept in advance that when you learn how to sing, that kind of process means you will sometimes sound bad. Now, if you start from this kind of I don't have anything to lose starting point, my voice is already bad. If you think that already, let's take that in the positive way. I mean, I know my voice is bad, so I don't care. So I'm just going to make bad noises. Do it. Go ahead and make bad noises and some good noises. Don't start getting addicted to the good noises and then not accept the bad noises. You have to accept them all in order to explore and get more and more of the good noises and the good singing, results. Yeah? Go through the process by all means. And you begin by either taking a voice lesson with a teacher and or going to my article on how to learn singing and just start from there. There's a lot of stuff you can do on your own. You can learn anatomy on your own. You can start warming up your voice. You can start paying attention to what it feels like in your throat when you're singing. I do recommend, if it's the very beginning, that you take a lesson or two and get some guidance and some extra feedback, outside feedback. That's important specifically for singing because we don't hear our voices on the inside of our heads the way they are in reality. If you can go to my article about how to practice singing, I give you a structure of practice, and at the end of that structure is the singing through that I discussed with Alisa today. Do not ever skip that part, especially you, because right now you have that spark. You have that enthusiasm. That last part will help you maintain it, and then you're good. Okay? Please keep me posted. Send me an email or maybe call the show after a while that you started your journey and just tell us how you're doing. I'm really curious. Thank you for this question. That was a very good one. And let's move on to the singing part. So the singing section of today is me and Alisa singing a duet for you. We are singing an opera duet. It's from Le Nozze di Figaro, The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart. It's my favorite. It's actually here, right here. My favorite Mozart opera. And this is a duet called Sull'aria or On the Breeze. I'll just tell you a little bit about it in case you don't know the duet. And I also put the lyrics for you to understand what we're singing about. I'm singing the role of the Countess, who's been married to the Count, of course, and her personal servant is getting married, and she is expected to meet the Count because the Count has the right to the first night with the bride. That's the way it was back then. So that Count promised that he would waive that right, but with this specific servant, Susanna, he changed his mind because obviously she's like super hot. And of course the Countess is devastated. And they both trick the Count to meet Susanna in the woods at night. But that's actually going to be the Countess. They're going to catch him red-handed. The Countess dictates a letter to Susanna and she writes it down to invite the Count to meet her in the bushes. When the Countess says in the bushes, what do you mean we meet in the bushes? The bushes are very low on the ground. So when Susanna hears that, she freaks out like, are we really gonna say that? And of course she cannot say no to her boss. So she just writes it down and smiles. It is a very almost tragic place to be in for both of them. I mean, Susanna can be raped for all we know. And the Countess is being betrayed and heartbroken. So there you go, Sull'aria. Canzonetta sull'aria, sull'aria che soave firetto, questa sera spirerà
sotto i piedi del boschetto, sotto i piedi